John Higgins, my co-host, and Mike Christoff from TaxRock today. So how are you doing, John?
I'm doing well, Gaynor. Just coming off a 10-day vacation in the Virgin Islands, so I'm doing really quite well. I just
That's
got to get
good.
back into the get in the swing of things here. So looking forward to hearing and learning about TaxRock.
Yeah. So Mike Christoff, you are one of the brains behind TaxRock. So tell us a little bit about that and how you came to have this new solution for tax firms and taxpayers.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Really enjoy the work that you and John are doing here with Accounting Ignited. So I'm excited about the conversation here. So I am an enrolled agent. I've been practicing for about 20 years. And in the course of that, I've worked at large national firms where I've held a variety of roles. I think I've held just about every role you can have in one of those firms, from doing like administrative work to associate level work to senior level, management. So I've been really close to the operations and then also with clients and client relationships. And so TaxRock is a platform that was originally built to support both our teams and our clients in our professional services work, which is representation like I do, but then also compliance work. So tax preparation, accounting, payroll services for small businesses. And so the platform is actually relatively new to the market. It's not a new platform, however. It's one that we've used internally for quite a while, quite effectively, and then recently have made it available for partners and some verticals.
Wow. So you really, one of the things that I was impressed with TaxRock is how you came to commercialize it for the greater market after using it in your firm. And so what was really the impetus to like take it to a broader level?
We actually got quite a bit of pull from partners. I mean, I think when we developed TaxRock, the intention was always that, at some point, if we were solving pain points that we were having internally, it was going to solve pain points in the market, no doubt about it, and that we would commercialize it, at some point. But it was really with partners that we were working with, and we just started to get a lot of pull for, hey, can we use that? Because they had mutual clients that were benefiting from it, and we just felt like, yeah, I guess now's the time. You never know when you want to pull the pin, but you kind of feel like you lit the fuse, and here we go.
Hmm. Yeah. So how does TaxRock, I guess, differ from we have transcript software already for IRS
Um,
transcripts within the firm. Where does TaxRock dovetail into that and then go beyond it?
Yeah, sure. So, what's kind of interesting is I've learned a lot in the past few months as we've been bringing TaxRock to market about, all the different options that are out there. So I've actually learned quite a bit about, a lot of the software that does have the ability to get account transcripts. And so, TaxRock was kind of built, in a vacuum, a bit without kind of understanding what other tools were out there. And I think what I've learned is that the difference with TaxRock is that it was built to not just empower and to help operationally a firm, but also to strengthen client relationships. And so while TaxRock does have, it does obtain IRS account transcripts in an automated way. It analyzes those transcripts, looks at the codes, puts that data into understandable fashion, for a professional. It also does that for the client. And so what TaxRock provides is a dashboard view for a taxpayer or a client to actually log into, and it gives them the ability to see their IRS account in as simple a form as, probably the best analogy is if you were to log into your bank account or your credit card account. Where you can see, if you have a balance due, that's evident. If you've been making federal tax deposits or estimated tax payments, that's very apparent. It gives you the ability to drill down into individual tax periods and tax forms and see details around payments that have been made, if returns are filed or not filed, if there's IRS activity, associated with that. And so what's powerful about that is providing that knowledge to the client as well as the practitioner. And the practitioner actually has the exact same view of the IRS account that the taxpayer does. And so what that allows for is the practitioner and the client to have almost an instant understanding of the client's tax position at that time, and allows the taxpayer to establish, trust, for sure, that comes with the transparency around that.
So, Mike, give me a little insight because I'm not real familiar with the process. So, I'm a taxpayer and I can log
Mhm.
into the IRS to see my activity.
Right.
So, can I assign that responsibility to my tax professional as well?
Yes. Yes.
Not with TaxRock, but just standard IRS login. Can my tax professional also log in to my?
To your tax account through the IRS. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Kind of outside of TaxRock.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I believe that the IRS does have that function. I think
Okay.
what's interesting, John, is that I don't know much about it, and I don't know many practitioners that do either.
Yes. I
Right?
don't feel so bad asking the question then.
Yeah, no. I think it's a great question, and I think that that's one of the, that's a real pain point, is, and I don't. I mean, I'm not going to, like, I'm not here to bash the IRS or anything like that. I mean, I know,
Yeah.
what they're doing with limited budget, and I know that there's been a major emphasis on trying to leverage technology, and that they know these things, but they've struggled to implement, tools around this stuff that make that easy. And that is one of the things that TaxRock solves for sure.
So if I'm using TaxRock, if I subscribe to TaxRock, then I'm not, as a taxpayer or a professional, I don't need to log into the IRS directly.
That's
TaxRock
correct.
does it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And then I would also say that, as a practitioner or even a taxpayer, I'm personally allergic to having to call the IRS, and sit on hold for,
Yeah.
practitioner priority, service. Um, and it prevents a lot of that. Yeah, a lot of that type of work.
So you can basically get a snapshot of the IRS activity, but you can't necessarily file anything through TaxRock, can you? Like as
Yeah,
a
that's correct. Yeah, yeah. And
okay.
so what TaxRock does, TaxRock is not a replacement for other software within a firm.
Mhm,
This is a tax account monitoring and
mhm,
client collaboration tool. It's, while it does provide a snapshot, which is incredibly valuable. I mean, no doubt about it.
mhm,
It's quite funny. When I started in my career, when we had a client come on, and there was, some tax issues, one of the things that we had to do was call the IRS, have them fax over account transcripts, right? And then we would take those account transcripts and we'd break them down in an Excel spreadsheet. And it was, just to be able to really understand where they're at, but then also put together what we called a liability letter. And this was like our first deliverable to a new client. And, this is what the IRS says you owe, and these are the missing returns. And for the first time, a taxpayer actually understood it. It's incredibly valuable for them. I actually recently had a conversation with an attorney, an IRS tax attorney that works for one of the big four consulting firms, and that's exactly how they still do it, including the Excel spreadsheet. And he was saying that they charge a couple of $1,000s, for that letter, to this day. And so, that's something that just TaxRock does by instantly, anytime that you log in, it's current, and it's getting updated, and so you can log in whenever you want, and it's current information. So that's extremely powerful, really valuable. Allows a practitioner to spend time, doing much more valuable work for clients, but then also is providing a real tangible value to the client. And I think what's interesting is what I've learned in my career is that clients value communication, relationship,
mhm,
trust, right? As practitioners, and I think most firms know that, but struggle to be able to deliver it because of
mhm.
manual and kind of like reactive processes. It's like the phone call comes in or the email from the client. It's like, I know I should respond, but I've got all this other stuff in front of me. And one of the real values of this platform is that it really operationalizes, the ability to provide that value to a client.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. I can imagine a practitioner, you know, being able to go through the dashboard with a client and also being able to charge for that service too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's an IRS account monitoring service, and especially, tax resolution, that would be huge.
Mhm.
And also for practitioners who might only get a handful of tax resolution cases a year or during
Yeah.
tax season, you see something on a return, you can get the client set up with TaxRock and walk through it all with them. So I think that's amazing. And I know I have logged into the IRS website as a citizen, and you have to go through ID.me and all of those things. So this would be beneficial. And as you said, it's backed by all the expertise of your professional. So very cool. So
Yeah, I think
what are your plans, Mike, for TaxRock, like in the next few years?
So we, I would say in the accounting space that it's proving to be extremely valuable for firms. And the objective there is to frankly get it into as many firms' hands as possible, that want it, and would kind of benefit from it. And so, the strategy there, I mean, it's a really simple, I mean, it's web-based. It's as simple as getting a signed information authorization, a Form 8821, which most firms, already do, and getting that submitted, and then it's set up, for a client. And so it's a really easy, simple lift. And the strategy just not just from kind of onboarding and making that super easy, which we've done. I think our team has done a really good job of that, but from a pricing strategy, to ensure that this is something that can be provided to, not just large firms. I mean, definitely feedback that we've gotten from a lot of companies is like there's a lot of really great technology out there where the small guys can't afford it, and that's not the intention here at all. I think that one thing in my travels and my experience that I've learned is that it's an industry where it's like consumers don't have knowledge.
Yeah.
The analogy I give you is it's almost like car dealerships were 20 years
Yeah.
ago, 30 years ago, where you walked in and, the consumer had no knowledge and, it created, and I'm not saying dealerships were bad. It's just when people don't have knowledge, they don't have trust. Right. And
Oh.
it created a problem in that relationship. And so what TaxRock has the ability to do is to just kind of elevate, I think, the entire profession in a pretty
Mhm.
profound way because of its ability to educate, taxpayers and kind of create that collaboration. So that would be, kind of the intention with it in the accounting space. And we certainly have had interest from other verticals, and I think any firm that has an interest in monitoring tax compliance can benefit from it, and that's what we're learning.
I think an advantage that you have as I'm beginning to learn about TaxRock is that it can be used very effectively without having to integrate with other tax
Mhm.
software that a
Yeah.
practitioner would have in place. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it works extremely well, kind of standalone. And it was definitely built with the intention of being able to integrate. So, it's got an APIs that can be integrated. It's never been intended to be a workflow engine. That's not what it is. It's there to, do one thing, extremely well. That's, monitor. It's to be proactive. It is to surface issues. It is to then, as those issues come up, to help analyze it, and then to develop workflow that then is handled within firms' other systems.
Can TaxRock alert me as the taxpayer? Can I receive some kind of alerts when there's activity in my IRS account?
Yeah. Yeah. So what the system does is when there are updates, it'll kick off alerts in the form of emails that go to practitioner and the client, optionally.
Yeah, I see
And
a
and
real
that's
value there.
oh, go ahead,
I
John.
think I've used a small practitioner for many years to do my taxes. I've used two or three, and you kind of already hit on it. The biggest challenge or concern I've had about those relationships is communication or lack of communication. They'll
Yeah,
send me my return to do a final review, and I'll say, "Yeah, it looks good. Go ahead, file it." But I don't always get a communication that they filed it. You
yes,
know, so this would be awesome just to get that affirmation that yeah, the IRS got your return on such and such a date, just as an
yeah.
example.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I mean, you get the email, hey, the IRS has got your return. You get the email, your refund's coming,
Mhm.
which, kind of saves those phone calls. Not that this is
Right.
meant to replace, communication with direct communication, but the idea is that you want valuable communication, and where's my refund is not that's something that could be handled in a different way. And
Right.
that's just a simple example, John. I think that,
Yeah.
one thing is that it provides, like proact, it provides proactive monitoring. So
Mhm.
one thing that can happen, is when a return is filed, um, that return might not get processed for some reason, right? And sometimes that's because it's been flagged for a potential audit. And that is something that is reflected on the account transcript. And that is something that the system would alert to. And that is something that would allow the taxpayer to know that that's happened, would also allow the professional to know that that happened, and then give them the ability to resolve that proactively. And what is interesting is that, firms deal with, like tax preparation firms, I think specifically, deal with this a lot, where, um, clients, file their return once a year with the firm, and then a notice comes out. And the taxpayer's position, they feel like the tax professional's job is to kind of manage their tax position throughout the year. And that if that notice comes out, it's on the professional to deal with that notice because they prepared the return.
Mhm.
You talk to the tax professional and it's like, well, that notice got kicked out because you didn't give me one of your 1099s, and that's not on me, right? And where I
Yeah.
think that can end up a lot of times is either the professional's doing free work, right, and kind of resenting it, or they're charging the client for it, and then the client, is kind of resenting it. And so one of the
Right.
applications of TaxRock that we've seen is firms using it to provide year-round management of the relationship. And it's what I've seen is it's allowed a lot of firms to move from like less of a seasonal, business into more of a year-round, being able to provide year-round services, to clients, whether that's advisory, sometimes it's just monitoring, services.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So where can we find out more about TaxRock?
From our website, which is, taxrock.com.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Excellent. And so getting set up then it sounds like you just set up an account and you're pretty much ready to go with TaxRock.
It's really pretty seamless. What we'll typically do is, meet with a firm. We can do a demo. It's a very simple, platform to use. I think, one thing I would point out about it is that because it was designed for consumers or for taxpayers, um,
Mhm.
it's very easy to use. So this isn't something that, you need to be a tax professional to understand how to use it. A firm can, very easily understand how to use it, have their team understand how to use it. So we'll typically go through a demo, identify how they would like to apply it. And then it's really just a function of, getting their CAF number. We could produce 8821s and talk to them about how to get, their clients signed up through electronic signature.
Excellent. So
Great.
pretty easy, seamless, and I would also say in today's world where everybody's used to these instant notifications, having something like TaxRock to do some of the notification work for your firm is it's feeding the reward system of your client, right? So they're going to be, you know, excited to get those automatic kind of reminders too. So I think
Yeah.
it's overall it's a great system. So I'm glad that we heard about TaxRock, and now hopefully lots of other people have too, and you'll be able to help more clients and more firms.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All
Yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the information with us, Mike. I think it's a great application you've put together there from what I've seen.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, super. Well, that's one more example of digital transformation in the accounting profession. And thank you for tuning in. And thanks, Mike. And thanks, John. I think this was a great and very insightful conversation.